Hi everyone, this is Howard. Welcome again to another Star Talk Tuesday, this Tuesday being August 4th, 2020. Okay, so this is kind of at least I think it's going to be a relatively good week for observing, assuming that weather conditions are favorable to us. Sky conditions, or rather celestial conditions, meaning the particular objects that are going to be up in the sky, we're looking at some pretty good visual opportunities here, so I'm hoping that the weather will be kind to us. Now, as I mentioned, a bit of a complex week here in that the beginning of the week is going to be tough. If you were paying attention to the sky yesterday, of course it was a full moon, which means tonight it will be a relatively bright and relatively full moon still early on in the evening, wrecking the best part of the evening, I think. For relatively faint objects, not to say that you still can't enjoy the sky, it'd just be very challenging to see some of the fainter things. But later on, just a few days later, in fact, this Thursday and Friday, the 6th and the 7th, we're going to go ahead and change the dates to match the view on those particular days. The moon will be rising significantly later, and we're afforded a view of what I will frequently say is, I think, the best part of the sky. And it's not only the best part of the sky, but two of the best objects in the sky that are relatively dynamic, meaning planets, are right in that part of the sky as well. So it's like going to your favorite restaurant, and while you're there, two of your favorite movie stars or two of your favorite whatever happen to be at the restaurant at the same time you're there. And so this part of the sky, which is the center of the Milky Way galaxy, we've got Jupiter and Saturn lingering about there relatively early in the evening. And so this is a beautiful opportunity to catch a view of some galactic as well as solar system objects in a very small amount of sky. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and change our date here. Let's begin by changing this. Let's make this the 7th. And we're going to go ahead and we'll do this the old-fashioned way. We'll go ahead and accelerate our time. And don't go too fast. Let's change this over to the western part of the sky. And we watch as our familiar digital sunset occurs. There we go. Now, I don't want to miss that opportunity because that just looked too perfect. It's exactly 9 o'clock on the evening of August 7th. What I see here is the ISS. Exactly. I wasn't planning on that, but that just happened to pop into view. So let's go ahead and move the clock backwards so we can look at that big bright thing. So here's a beautiful opportunity if you want to forecast this. On Friday night, as you can see here, Friday night at roughly 5.5 minutes to 9 o'clock, the International Space Station will become visible in the northwestern part of our sky, and it is going to rise into a fairly prominent view. So if we accelerate time just a little bit, you can see how quickly it's going to be moving across the sky now. Excuse me, seconds are ticking by relatively quickly there, as you can see on the clock. But anything you see moving, those are all satellites. And the faint objects and the relatively bright objects, those are all satellites. And as you can see, the International Space Station is just trucking across the sky. And it is this big, giant basketball of light, according to this. And there it goes. And look at this. We've got almost a photo opportunity there. Let's pause it right there for, well, not really pause. Actually, let's try and pause that for a moment. I don't want it to get away from us. This is the part of the sky I want to be looking at. And this will certainly rise up later on and be much darker. But at this particular part of the evening, not only are we seeing there's the center of the galaxy, and there are two solar system guests, Jupiter and Saturn, but we also got a man-made object. We've got the International Space Station as an unplanned surprise. I did not count on that. That kind of just popped into view. This is what I love about Stellarium, is that it always alerts you to these wonderful things going on in the sky. So, again, this began, remember, at just 6 minutes before, and you can see it very rapidly, within just a few minutes, moved its way all the way across the sky from the northwest all the way down into close to the southeastern part of the sky. You can observe this and watch this in what I would consider the best view, passing through the best part of the sky. This is a great setup for a wonderful evening observing. Let's just keep our fingers crossed the weather's nice. Well, I'm just kind of chuffed that we had that little surprise there. Okay. So we're at just before 9 o'clock, and the ISS is passing through the view. We'll go back, bring our southerly view up, and then of course you can see that eventually the International Space Station will drop down. There it goes, and that it's as abrupt as that. Let's go backwards just for a moment. So as we zoom in, what'll happen is the ISS just simply passes into the shadow of the Earth, and just the light from the sun gets blocked off, and it'll just vanish from view. It doesn't typically fade from view, and if it fades, it's fading fairly quickly as it passes into the edge of the shadow of the Earth and then completely into the shadow behind it. But typically just kind of winks out. Okay, that was a nice little treat there. Let's go ahead and accelerate into the evening. There we go. Look at that big bright center of the galaxy. All right, so this is about 8 minutes to 7.5 minutes to 10 o'clock at night. It's not too late. The sun has gone down, but what clearly hasn't happened yet is the moon hasn't come up. And what we see is the spectacular view of one of the best parts of the sky, and the heavy sides, because of course it comes up in the worst time of the year for us as Floridians here. It's in the summer months, and so again, I can't say this enough. I'm hoping the weather will hold up for us. So as we bring this in, we're looking into the bright central part of our galaxy, and it's in this part of the sky where we see, I call them the bookends. On either side of the center of the galaxy are two spectacular constellations that sort of highlight this area of the sky. We'll put their artwork up. It's Sagittarius and Scorpius. There's Sagittarius and there's Scorpius. And let's get rid of the artwork, and we'll put up just the line so you can see the pattern of stars that we see here. Typically, this is what we refer to as the fishhook, and over here is the teapot. And these are asterisms or patterns that we see in the sky, but as you can see, what they do is they kind of frame out and illustrate the sort of boundaries of the bright central region where what we call the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And of course, the bright star Antares, marking the heart of the Scorpion over here, the right object, Antares literally translating into not Mars, is the red star that happens to be on the path. Of course, there's Jupiter and Saturn. It falls on the path of the planets along the ecliptic. And so occasionally Mars went by, and the Greeks recognized that there was Mars, or what they called Antares. And then there was Antares, which is not Aries. And so that's how the star kind of earned its name, is the opposite of, or in opposition to Aries. It sits in this spectacular part of the sky in Scorpius, the Rho Ophiuchi region. We've spoken about that before. But it's in this particular part of the sky where we see down here in the fishhook. I want to point out some relatively easily accessible objects for folks that have binoculars. Is my little star cluster down here. There we go. Let's kind of bring this in. Right here in the bend of the Scorpion is NGC 6231. I think I can get that highlighted up there. There. Oh, I had it a second ago. Wow, this is just it's making a fool of me now. Anyway, so right here, I just had it a second ago, is a little clump of stars. It's one of my, there we go. It's the false comet, the northern jewel box, NGC 6231. I didn't know it was called the crocodile cluster. It's interesting. In any case, as you can see, teasingly, there are other objects in this part of the sky and other star clusters, but this is fairly prominent, fairly easily spotted because of its relatively bright and prominent location in the bend or the elbow or the sort of twist in the Scorpion's tail here. It's found very quickly and easily with a pair of binoculars. Over here, we've got Ptolemy and the butterfly cluster into the tail. But as we come up into the teapot region, and this is kind of sort of just following this beautiful sort of celestial trail of objects here, from one cluster into the stinger, Ptolemy's cluster, the butterfly cluster, then the spout of the teapot, and right above that what we find are two truly spectacular objects under relatively dark skies. In a pair of binoculars you can spot this, but mostly, generally what I found is, and I used to say I've only ever been able to see the clump of stars. I've never been able to see the faint glow of any nebulosity around here at the Lagoon Nebula. But recently I have been able to, actually let's get that off there. I've been able to find some of that glowing nebulosity there. It was just, I think the challenge is of course that you would need really dark skies in order to see that. But not too far away is this huge, massive, it looks like a giant amoeba. This thing is this is the Great Sagittarius star cloud, and it's just this. Stellarium does this, renders it fairly well. It's just this bright protuberance of stars in the galactic bulge here. It's whoops, it's quite literally millions of stars in a really vast formation with, as you can clearly see, some dark nebula highlighted in the area. And nearby, of course, are other ionizing emission nebula. We've got the Swan and the Heart and Soul up there. Anyway, so Scorpius, Sagittarius, and now Jupiter and Saturn over here trailing behind the teapot, and they've been there for a while, but what we've got is an opportunity to see them in a nice relatively high position in the sky, and I think the weather might be kind to us. But Jupiter, we can bring in Jupiter, and let's kind of cheat and lock in on that because I seem to be a terrible pilot. And ooh, we've got Io. Wow, this seems to be a very fortuitous sort of night. We've got a lot of things about to happen here. So I can clearly see, and this is not, I didn't plan this, clearly, this is nature, but I didn't know this was happening. This is what I love about the discovery here, just in a simple program. We've got the great red spot coming around the bend right there, right around the limb of Jupiter, and there's Io. It's already crossed over the limb of Jupiter. It's transiting the face, so what that means is we're going to be treated to a shadow here any moment. So I just happened to stumble across this. This is at, well, 3 minutes to 10 o'clock at night. And as we accelerate the clock, watch. There's that shadow. It just magically appeared. Not magically, of course, but now we've got this wonderful event. We've got another beautiful trio of features across Jupiter. You've got the great red spot. You've got Io transiting as well as a shadow transit. This is great. We start off with the International Space Station. We've got the center of the galaxy. We've got Jupiter with Io, a transiting shadow, and the great red spot. So far, so good. This has been a pretty good evening. So we got a lot to look forward to. Now, I don't want to leave out Saturn, of course. Now, Saturn was just like Jupiter, was just recently at opposition. Let's lock in on that and bring it a little bit closer. Saturn is one of the jewels of the sky, and it almost doesn't require any explanation on my part. I don't need to sing it any praises. And if you haven't seen Saturn in a telescope, all I can say is, and I don't mean this as an exaggeration, I mean this truly, put it on your bucket list. Because I don't think there's an amateur astronomer out there that has looked up into the sky for any amount of time at a significant number of objects. It could have a long career of looking, and I'm willing to bet that 9 out of 10 of them will say that Saturn is in the top 2, either number 1 or number 2, as far as their most favorite objects in the sky. And that's not to knock. There's a lot of things in the sky, and so I don't want to say what is absolutely the best, but Saturn is definitely this is a top shelf item in the sky. So Saturn is at, you can tell by the shadow behind it onto the rings that it was just at opposition, meaning just directly opposite the sun with the Earth lined up in between. We've got a little bit of deflection there because the Earth is moving in its orbit and sort of changing the orientation, so where the shadow lines up in the planet, it's kind of deflect off to the left as we continue to move in our orbit. But we've got a nice tilt on the planet revealing about as much of the rings as we're going to be able to see before the Saturn itself starts to precess and wobble up, and the rings will start to, in fact, they may have already start to precess upwards, and eventually we'll get an edge-on view of the rings, and that'll be in roughly 7 years or so. But all right, let's bang this out of here. Whoop, there goes time. Now, we've got this wonderful part of the sky going on. This is really early. We're not even at 11 o'clock in the evening. But now we want to go ahead and accelerate time, and I'm not going to go ahead and rip through the clock. So let's go ahead and just change the date, and we're going to make this on the evening of August the 11th. I know that's out of our time frame. I know technically that falls into the next week cycle, but this is relatively important enough to talk about and give you at least advance notice so that you can be prepared for this in case you happen to miss next Tuesday's show. But so here we are at 10:40 in the evening on the evening of the 11th of August, and this coincides with, of course, the peak of the Perseid meteor shower. So let's go ahead and lock that out. Let's get rid of those lines there. And now we look and change our view over here to the northeastern part of the sky. There we go. And there's the Perseus, the radiant. It's coming out of the constellation Perseus, of course. There's Perseus. It actually looks like it's coming out of that giraffe's backside, but let's get that a little bit higher up. The Giraffe that laid golden eggs. Okay. Right around 1 o'clock in the morning, we've got that high enough. Let's go ahead and get that artwork out of the way. And as you can see, there comes Mars. Now, there's a little sneak hint of it. There's the moon coming up over the horizon there, just barely. There's the label of it, so it's not too far away. Now, this is the reality. On the night of the Perseids, the peak night, I should say, we've got the last quarter moon coming up. And so that's going to be somewhat of a challenge, but I think it's a small price to pay for the quality of the sky here. As long as it's relatively dark, I think that you're going to be able to still see the Perseids. Now, again, as if you've heard our talks before, the radiant here is representing that central area there. That's where you see a streak in the sky that is connected to the Perseids. If you see a streak over here, or a streak over here, or there, if you trace them back, they'll all seem to originate from this point. Now, that's not to say that you can't see meteors that just happen to be incidental to the sky or where the Earth has happened to be at that moment. So let's say you see a streak right here. You can conclude that that's not one of the Perseids because of its angle relative to the radiant. It's probably not one of the Perseids. It just happened to be another random thing that the Earth happened to bump up against in the sky, rub up in its atmosphere. So as the Perseids are going on, and the moon has not come up yet, relatively low, you still be able to see Perseids up in this part of the sky. So 1 o'clock in the morning, they're not going to be too consistent in the sky. I don't know if it's going to be dark enough for them to really show up yet, but they typically come up a little bit later. But that's when the moon will come up. In the meantime, what you could be looking at is that we've got galaxies in the sky. And there's the Andromeda galaxy, and there's the Triangulum galaxy. These are sitting in the constellation, of course, Andromeda and Triangulum, but they're relatively close to the radiant in the part of the sky. You could see Mars is nearby, so we've got a regular smorgasbord going on across the sky. Anyway, this plays out into the wee hours of the morning. Let's go ahead and bring up there. Of course, the sky brightens. There's the moon. So it almost looks like the sun's coming up, but that's just the moon. So right around, there we go. This is spectacular. 4:30 in the morning. The Perseid radiant is high in the sky. Perseid meteors should be going off. We've got the last quarter moon in the sky, hopefully not interfering too much with the sky. But we've got some old friends joining us again. Here are our winter friends, Orion and Taurus, the Pleiades, the Hyades, and of course Orion, its glorious nebula. There's Venus joining this is like a big old celestial reunion going on in the sky. It's kind of fun. Anyway, I could blather on all night long. I think I've run out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. We'll catch you next time.